Okay, great. So welcome everyone. I'm so delighted to have so many friends here and so many, for me, new faces here as well. And it's with great pleasure that I introduce Judit Frigyesi, Judit Niran Frigyesi, um, whom I met, I believe, for the first time in 1996.
I don't know, maybe. Yeah,
at a party on an island up the Danube, where we were hanging out with a bunch of people from Budapest Week, and that's where I met Zev Feldman also for the first time. So as Clara mentioned, we'd love to have your questions. Please feel free to put them into the chat, and Clara will monitor as we go along. And depending on how it goes, we'll maybe jump into some of those questions in the middle of our conversation. And it may be we also save them for the end. And we're definitely planning to save some time at the end for your questions. So please take a note of them. But for me, it's an extremely wonderful honor to have Judith here to speak about this book that has, I think, touched a lot of us very deeply. So Judith, as you know from our introduction, is a teacher, a poet, a musicologist, and an ethnomusicologist, which is a lot of interrelated hats to wear. Her main ethnomusicological work deals with the prayer chant of Eastern European Jews, known as Davenin. And as she notes, this is really true. She is the only scholar to have carried out field work in communist East Europe after the Second World War, and particularly and specifically on this topic. So our topic of conversation today is writing on water, the sound of Jewish prayer. And I wanted to start our conversation by talking about this, this very thing, the sound of Jewish prayer, which is of all of the beautiful things that we have in your book, is not something we're able to access. We have beautiful images, we have poems, and we have text, but the actual sound that you describe so beautifully is not available to us. So I'm hoping that we'll get to hear some of your field recordings today, Judith. But I wanted to start out by getting a sense of what it is that you mean by davening. And I would invite you to sort of speak on this topic a little bit, but there's also this beautiful passage that you write on page 70, when you are relating what Rot Yanu is telling you about what is davening. And so maybe we can start there, and maybe we'll get to hear some of his recordings. Yeah. I don't know. And also before you start, I mean, do you have anything you'd like to say as an introduction, Judith, before we really dig in?
No, I'm waiting for your question.
Okay, let's start with this passage. And he's saying, you know, it's after the little break there, and you say, I want to explain 3 things.
Oh, shall I read it?
Yes, please. That'd be great. Yeah.
Oof, none of the glasses are good. Davening is prayer. Do you hear me?
Yeah.
It's the simple prayer you say every day, 3 times a day, morning, afternoon, and evening. When you daven, you say the words. I mean, read them as they are in the prayer book. That's all you do, nothing else. You say them to a tune, of course. It would never occur to anyone to say the words without notes. You could do it without melody, I suppose, the way they read at the university. This is, of course, ironic on his part, but this was not the custom where I come from. In my time in the villages, and not only in the villages, but everywhere in the Jewish world, prayer, learning, and reading, all those things happened with melody. Still, it is not a song. You don't sing the prayer. Davening follows the text as you feel it, according to your rhythm and your voice. In some circles, they call this what you call it Juditka recitation. I heard this word here in Pest for the first time. And this is only a very small part of what could be said about Davening. And I mean, if you ask me to explain what Davening is, the whole book is about that.
Exactly.
And in order to, I will like to read later another quote, which is written not by me, but by Josef Roth. And I'm quoting him in the book. You can translate davening as prayer, or you can translate, I mean, the official translation of this Yiddish word is prayer. But of course, prayer in the way we understand it in the Christian world doesn't exist. It's something altogether different. Or you can say it's recited prayer. There are many shocking things even in this little section I read, which of course needs explanation. The problem is that you cannot talk about davening without putting it in the context. And davening really is something that deals with the original, how shall I say it? Something that digs out from the depths of one's soul. I know it's very bombastic, but I have no other word to say it. The original understanding of eternity and death. If I might say, it's a path that's trying to give you a space where you can think about these things, where you can think about these things, but not intellectually, but in your heart. And you know, we all remember that original gesture or that original fear. I don't know how many of you had when you were a child, that fear of death, which is really not a fear of death, but it's really a fear of the realization of eternity. That, I mean, you can put it in a banal way that we are so small, but it's a kind of thing that is impossible to understand. And actually, if you look at the music of Jewish prayer, again, prayer is the wrong word, the music of Jewish davening or tefillah or whatever you wish, it really is that kind of, it's a meeting place where it's a space and a time that gives you a possibility to connect with yourself in this way. And that's why he said, you have to read the words every day. You have to read them every day, and what you feel is your thing. In other words, by reading these texts, and I have to give a little explanation to this just in a moment. With the reading of this text, you create an environment. So I have to give a little bit of background because I don't think this can be understandable. When you talk about, I'm trying to make it short so it wouldn't be a lecture. When you're talking about davening, you have to deal with time in its polarized way, time as eternity, time as the unending time, and time as the present time. You have to deal with space, and the davening creates a space. And I want to have a musical example showing that.
Yeah. I hear this in your writing. You write the whole book, as you say, circles around
Yes,
the topic.
yes.
And you approach it from very many different ways.
There is a saying that the walls of the synagogue, but synagogue is not a word that's used in this culture, it's called shul. The words of the prayer house or the shul are are built not of walls, not of bricks, but of the sound of the prayer,
Right.
or that the sound of the children's prayer will reveal the world, but the children's voice will redeem the world.
Right.
So you need to deal with the space, and you need to deal with the individual. That's very, very important.
Absolutely.
And you need to deal with the atmosphere. And so I just want to give a very basic background on all of this. What happens in the Jewish world, in the synagogue. I mean, I'm talking only about the traditional East Ashkenazi, East European Ashkenazi service. That's all. When I'm talking about Jews, please understand that it's only that. So what happens in a service, that you have a big text. I mean, here is the prayer book that I got from one of my informants. It seems to be small, but the letters are small that it's impossible to see them. So basically, you have to know it by heart. That's a little bit bigger one that's possible to read, more or less. That's what I use because I need to see the words. I don't know by heart the whole liturgy. And essentially, what you do if you go to a prayer house, and I apologize for those who know this, that you open the text assigned for that service and you read that text with recitation, of course, with melody from beginning till end.
Yeah.
And that's all you do. And you
Yep.
don't have to do anything else. And which means that the ritual is what you make for yourself. It's a very, very individualized ritual. You are making the ritual for yourself, and everybody else is reading the text aloud, making the ritual for themselves.
Absolutely.
And that's not the whole story, because even if people go out of the synagogue, there is a custom that Jews read all the psalms, like all the 150 psalms in one sit, and they will recite from beginning till end, and is sort of creating a totally private service. So you are living in a world where people, and yes, I have to add another thing immediately. When people are reading sacred texts, mystical texts, basically these texts are mystical. If we think we understand them, we are wrong. So you can understand it for the face value, but says Israel Mitzrayim, yes, Israel exited from Egypt. But okay, but it has a much deeper meaning, and every single text has a much deeper meaning. So basically, you are reading mystical texts that are almost impossible to understand, and you are reading them all the time, the whole life. You go through reading these texts, and even when you are not reading them, it is as if you would be reading them. And it's written many places that it never should end. It never should end. There is this funny scene in the 1938 or 39 film The Book, when the Hanon, the main character, goes on the road. He is going, I don't even know why he's going to the city where he's going to meet, or the shtetl where he's going to meet his beloved. And on the road he's going, with the book, and it's a little bit a parody, but in some ways it's true. And another thing I must add, I'm sorry, Christina, that this kind of it's a lifestyle. Okay, it's not like okay, now I decide that I read a book. It's a way of life, and people learn this when they are children. In fact, in this culture, people start to recite the prayer before they know how to speak. And many told me that they are reciting the prayers at the age of one or two, even before that, the moment they can set out sounds. And the prayers are in Hebrew, and the language of these children was Yiddish. So from a very early age on, through music, you are connected to a mystical text that you will understand very gradually after many, many, many repetitions. So this is the background to this, a little bit the background to this whole culture, which is of course not answering your question, but I'm sorry, I felt I had to say that.
I'd like to have us have an opportunity to perhaps to listen to something, if you would be able to be willing to share a recording of some.
Now, you know, I could, and I prepared examples, but again, why didn't I give a CD? Why didn't I attach a CD to the book? Because it's not understandable, because this is not music that many times I was asked, please, when I was teaching at the end of the course or the workshop, let's have a concert. Okay, no, you can't have a concert. This is not music to listen to. I mean, I will play some, okay? I will play, but it is music that you do it and you hear the others doing it around you. And if you are not able to do it, if you are not in that atmosphere of that you are doing it, then you don't hear it the right way. So you know what, if you really want to hear something, let me.
You write about.
Yes.
You have a passage in the book where it's later in the book where you describe being, I think, at Kaczynski Shul, and you're there and you're inside and you're in the moment, and then you say that when you step outside of the room and you go into a different room, and you're out and you can't find it back in, right? And that seems like it describes what you're talking about. You need to be in the space.
Yes, Christina, this is just amazing that you remarked that. I really, it makes my day. Yes, there is this scene. I mean, I'm explaining this in the book, not the way I'm explaining it now. And I'm a little bit ashamed of myself to explain it in this way. I don't think it's right. And that's why I wrote that book. I give stories. I give things that happened to me, and I tell stories that people told me. I tell things that I've seen, and so through it's practice what I'm talking about, and you only can really understand if I don't know if you can start feeling it on your skin. And it really happened to me many, many, many times, and it's happening to me still today. That I'm in a total ecstasy. I'm in the synagogue. It actually in Kaczynski Street there is a remarkable Baltfila today, not like the one I heard, but really amazing. And I go there, and sometimes if there are a few holidays when you can record, and I record it and I take it home, and I thought of showing it here, but it just doesn't work. It's not beautiful. It's not music. You can't listen to it. It doesn't. You so much feel that he's doing it for himself. So much feel that he doesn't care how the voice comes out. And when you are in that situation, this is moving. This is heartbreaking. And when you are taken out of that situation, it just remains just music. You know, it just. So let me, if you really want to hear something, Christina, do you want to ask something, or you want to?
No, I think people would. I think that just for those of us who have never had the privilege or the opportunity to be in those spaces, to just hear a flavor, you know, like you described so beautifully in the book as you enter these spaces for the first time. And it's a mystery to you what you're hearing.
It is still a mystery to me.
Right. and
so it is still a mystery, right? And it's never. Okay, so I will try to show or let you hear something. Let me see, how do I do that? I go to screen. Yes. Share sound. Okay. Christina, if you don't hear, please let me know.
Sure. Yes, of course. That's amazing. That's so absolutely incredible. We had a question, I think Boaz Tarsi was asking what, if you happen to know which text or liturgical passage that was.
It's impossible to know, but I can tell you what that was. And you know, don't think that every day and all synagogues sound like this.
Sure.
That's a very particular shul. I recorded it on a weekday because that's the time when you can record it. Also, the acoustics are what they were from where I recorded it.
Uh-huh.
Every shul and every every holiday and every day has a different sound.
Yeah.
It's always like that you are within a big mass. But the most beautiful of these I could not record because they happened on Shabbat. This is like you feel the busyness of a weekday. You
Yeah.
know, everybody is very rushed and trying to, and you have a lot of noise outside. You know,
Traffic
they
going by,
traffic going by.
bells.
So it's
Yeah.
typically a weekday. This sound is a composition, and it can be absolutely amazing. You know, this is very, very important in this religion. First of all, uh, uh, this sound gives you freedom.
Yeah.
You can sing your own version. Nobody is going to hear it. Of course, somebody is going to hear it. There are people next to you, and you know, and
Sure.
there are situations when there is not so much balagan, if I may say,
Yeah.
or there are very few people. I, you know, you probably remember that story. How afraid I was in the little synagogue where I used to go. And I couldn't decide, should I sing the prayers or should I not sing the prayers, because I was the only woman.
Uh-huh.
And you know, if I cut in with a woman's soprano into the man's prayer, that's not very good. If they don't hear that I'm praying, that's also not very good.
Right.
So anyway, it was a very, very moving story that I don't want to.
This is
It's even now it brings tears to my
yeah,
eyes
yeah. I
how
have
that happened.
there's a passage I want to ask
But
you about that in a minute,
but never mind. That's
yeah, yeah, yeah.
not
I have a
the
question
topic.
about this role of the Baltfila that you mentioned, you talk about it, and I'm wondering if I was really struck by when you're describing it's probably both Gartner and Rotianu, where you're talking about they're talking about the role of the Baltfila as sort of being the signpost where they would sing certain things, they would sort of put their voice up to mark where you were in the text so that those who had gone ahead could
Okay, yes.
catch up, you know.
Let me finish
Yeah,
this
sure.
this topic, because
Yeah.
I really think it's important. So first of all, you are and that's what I told. I started to talk about the individual,
Yeah.
which all my Christian students remarked when I sent them to a synagogue, and I asked what was the most different.
Mm-hmm.
And I very often I get the answer that you go to a Catholic environment of a Protestant and a Christian community, and people immediately start dealing with you, you know, helping you, asking you.
Mm-hmm.
And in a Jewish community, nobody cares about nobody. Everybody cares about himself or herself during the prayer. Okay, outside that's another thing.
Sure.
Now, so this kind of noise creates a space where you can be alone with yourself. You are responsible of reading. You cannot just listen to somebody. It's just not possible. You must be doing what you are doing.
Mm-hmm.
And there are representations of what happens in a synagogue, like Isidore Kaufmann's, where you can see that half of the children are asleep or annoyed, or you know,
Mm-hmm.
they are daydreaming. That you are daydreaming, that's also your prayer. So it's you have this demand to do it for yourself, and you have this freedom of you know, nobody is going to go after and check you. At the same time, so it's a kind of really it's a good and it's a very demanding loneliness. I could talk a lot about that, but I just leave it like that. At the same time, you have the community around you, and that no, you have this protection that you know that everybody is doing this. And sometimes you hear and you can, and there are stories about that, which I also could quote, that
Mm-hmm.
you hear this person and that person, and you know, that you are sheltered. a great ethnomusicologist who happens to be Jewish, and he was in these communities before the war, told me that when he was a child, he felt that that sound was so strong that even if the enemy will come with 1,000 axes, they would not be able to break through. So now there is another aspect of this sound, and allow me to finish that. It's a kind of eternity. You are there, and there is no closing point to this. I mean, eventually the service ends, but the ending is very, I might say, wishy-washy.
Right.
It really doesn't end. That it doesn't start. You go into the synagogue and you think that it will start, but some people are already praying. The others are still talking. Then comes on Shabbat the Psuke de Zimra. Some people are not really listening to the Psuke de Zimra. It's not so important. That's the beginning part for those of you who know. And so you just really, it's very hard to say when really the Shabbat morning service begins. When is the real? Is it with Nishmat? Is it with Shoichin Ad? Is it where? Does it start with Psuke de Zimra? What happens with the blessings before Psuke de Zimra? Is it by the blessing when you put on the talis? You know, I mean, the man put on the talis, and you can see them. Is it already the ritual or before? So it's that kind of there is never a starting point, and you are just there suddenly. It sometimes reminds me of several compositions of Bartók. It's very interesting. People say he doesn't know how to begin the pieces, but I think he knows very well that that's how he wants to begin the pieces. But that's really a sidetrack.
That's amazing.
And the end is also like that.
Yeah.
So, and then you go on, and then you go home, and you keep repeating these prayers, and or you go you have a shop, let's say, and you are a shopkeeper, and you see the children next door are so it just there is this never ending, this it's an evocation of eternity, and in eternity you are very much in the present.
Yeah.
At every moment you are very much in the present.
Yeah.
So anyway, now you can ask a question.
Yeah, no, that's very much, you make that point several times. It comes through very clearly, this idea
that's what you had chosen for the motto for this talk, that there is no arrival from Davanan.
Yeah, exactly.
There is no arrival. And I could talk about a lot. Like, there is a very interesting effect that in Daven and the Baltfila too, the prayer leader also rushes through the cadential note. It's just going, and the cadential note is like you would just hit it, like give it a slap, and then let's go for the next one.
Right.
And that, of course, changes the perception of tonality, the perception of. I mean, prayer is not a homecoming. Prayer is really a path.
Yeah.
And in this culture, you are always on a path towards something that cannot be attained.
I have two things, two sort of topics. One of them is about your own sort of journey. You touched on this idea that nobody helps you, like you're there, you arrive. And you have these moving passages in the beginning of the book, along with those beautiful pictures of the lace, and the curtains. And it struck me that that's very much sort of women's work, sort of present there, but also invisible. And then there you are behind the curtain.
Yeah.
But you write, and then you describe how Gartner spent and Rotienu also spent a great deal of time with you, but they didn't explain things. You were really on your own. And so you write, I understood that the discovery of the unknown is an imaginary dialogue with the unknown, a conversation whose basis is empathy and fantasy. And so I was really struck by that passage.
Wow, I wrote that. Where did I write
it? Beautiful.
Yeah.
I can't remember. It's pretty early. I think it's in the Gartner. I think it's in the
Mm,
Gartner chapter.
that's right. When I'm walking on the street.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're describing this. And it feels you
Yeah.
really feel that these melodies, as you describe, like are filling you up as you take
Yeah.
these long walks.
Mm.
And I'm just curious about that experience. Then you were determined. You write very clearly at several points that you were determined to do this on your own. In some ways, you write that you could have
Yeah.
asked other people, you could have asked for some kind
Hmm.
of guidance, but then you kept turning
Yeah.
yourself back and saying, "I want to experience this as they experience it, as they learned it." And so
Mhm.
that's my question. It's not really a question, but I wanted you to hear you talk.
Yeah, I think that that's what it was. It's not good to. That's why I'm a little bit embarrassed now because
It's okay.
it's not good to explain too much. The problem, and I have to face that, well, with this culture in really in a grandiose manner, but even a simple class at the university when I'm trying to teach a piece, a composition, the moment you start explaining it, it's just not that. And then, I don't want to get into how I teach, but I had to figure out all kinds of funny things to be able to teach. But if you go to a different culture with a completely different attitude to, I wouldn't even say music, I would say um, making feelings sound. So it's the sound of certain feelings and attitudes to the world.
Yeah.
You go into a culture like that, and I asked somebody at the beginning, "Why are you making so much noise?" I was attending the Academy of Music at that time, and I was used to concerts of a completely different sort.
Uh-huh.
And the people were just totally hurt. And you cannot ask these kind of questions. And because there is an explanation, of course, but the explanation is wrong, and every explanation is wrong. And like children discover things about the world. We really have to just be there. And
Hmm.
I felt very much that I was there, and it took me 30 years to be able to put this into words.
Yeah.
I couldn't put it into words in any way whatsoever, but I just had to be there and had to be with them. And of course, they explained. I mean, Gertner is a classic example. He explained nothing, 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 absolutely nothing. He looked at me, and I loved to go to him. And
Mhm.
he looked at me. Okay, shall we start? And then he started. He didn't tell me what he was singing. He didn't tell me anything, anything. And he knew that he had to know that I didn't know.
Yeah.
And it was a wonderful school for me.
Right.
Absolutely, it was amazing, really, really amazing. And but then others, and when I started to know things, I would ask differently,
Right. You have
and
different questions to
I
ask.
wouldn't. I mean, my questions were very stupid all the time, but it were they were less stupid.
Right.
But the thing is, you know what I told you here about this conglomeration of sounds. Nobody explained that to me in these terms. Nobody told me, "Oh, this is like eternity." Nobody told me that. But you have that story with Roth that you probably remember, and there were stories, there were situations, and there was the sound, and then you just
Yeah.
understood. Um, Oh,
Yeah.
that's how I understood. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but this is how I understood
Well, and
it.
I mean, I think you must have understood because your book, I mean, just not to put too fine a point on it, but your book conveys these feelings to me.
Yeah. So
in some ways, and it seems like, you just said that it took you 30 years to sort of come to this, and I think that you include images and poetry. I wrote in my notes that you take photographs of feelings you want to remember. I don't know if that actually.
No, that's actually true. The photography, all of it was I was photographing atmosphere.
Yeah.
And emotions. I wasn't photographing objects, but I maybe I could add something to that. I came to this as raised in a communist country and being a totally secular Jew. Totally, like there are many. You don't have to be in a communist country to know nothing about the Jewish religion. For me, the idea of prayer was it was not something absurd, really, and outdated. And what I met with in this environment, if I may say, was that for these people, prayer was not what I thought. It really was. Nobody ever asked me, "Do you believe? What are you believing?" Or no one absolutely never asked me, "Do you believe in God?" Or what was happening was what fascinated me was that the philosophical aspect which I talked about, but beyond that intense unity with one's immediate emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never felt that, not in any other music either.
Right.
So people could sing out of tune. Anything was possible, and the only thing that mattered was that you have to be you in that moment. And so if you are bored, then you are going to do it bored.
Right.
And if you have a coarse voice, you do it with a coarse voice. And it's not about expressing the texts at all. It's not about I could show actually musical examples to that.
You have this scene sort of late in the book also where, and I can't remember the name of the shul, but you're describing sort of being there, and there's one person who's very loud and sort of shouting. But if somebody else tried to do the same thing, they were told, no, you can't do that, because they could tell, could tell, everybody could tell, well, that's not that person. It's not, it's not authentic. It's not that emanation.
Yes, you can't fake it, or I think sometimes maybe you can, but most of the time you can't fake it. Let me show you an example, a musical example to that. Let me see which one. All of them actually. Okay, let me show that one.
Yorges bis Israel, Yorges bis Arain. Yorgira do Shem, Imachtani mi Magdailim. Yoiseva do Shem, Aleichem, Aleichem vel benehem. Beruch imatal Hashem, Hashem Shomayim v'ores, Hashomayim, Shomayim lad Hashem. Ores nisna livnei Yodom. Lo yamesi meleyo, lo yerdedimo. Vanach nivorech yom yad Adonai, hallelujah.
Listen to the beginning of that. It is coming from the Hallel. It's Mesaros, Dr. Mesaros from Prague, who is singing it. And he was not about Tefillah, he was not a prayer leader, and it's more or less the melody of the Hallel, but really not typically the melody of the Hallel. He's mixing up all kinds of things, but that doesn't matter. It just came out of him. It's in a recording session.
Adoshem Zochrei Yorech, Yorech Bez Yisroel, Yorech Bez Sarai.
You feel that very, very strong momentary emotion here and gesture. Adoshem, Zochrei Yorech, Adoshem.
Adoshem Zochrei Yorech, Yorech Bez Yisroel, Yorech Bez Sarai.
And there is nothing so, I mean, I could tell you what the text is, but it's not
Adoshem
that.
Zochrei Yorech, Yorech Bez Yisroel, Yorech Bez Sarai. Yorech Adoshem, Imachtanim Imagdoilim.
And of course, here when he is singing Haktanim Magdoilim, of course there is something he's going to. The Elohim does not forget to bless you, to bless the house of Israel and the house of Aaron, and it's going to bless the small and the big. And this is the small and the big. Like like look at me, how katan, how small I am.
Imachtanim Imagdoilim.
Yes, that's how we are.
Imachtanim Imagdoilim. Yosef Hashem Aleichem, Aleichem Vel Benehem.
And then it just lets his voice. And there's nothing so sad about what in this continuation, but it really is just, gestures of such strong gestures. Every child would understand what that means. I don't know if this is beautiful or this is good music or this is interesting music. To me, it's very beautiful. To me, in a sense, this contains everything that this kind of Yiddishkeit has to say. That the immediateness of the expression, and of course, with I could show another example. I could show the film where somebody who really doesn't have a voice and he's just so involved that it really doesn't matter. I don't know whether you want to. Shall I do it?
Sure. I'm sure that everybody here would love to see a short clip of that video if you'd like.
Okay, so let's try to do this. Do you see? Do you see something?
Yeah.
Okay. So I will start now, and let me go just to big full screen. No, maybe we should go that. Let me do it another way.
Yeah, if you share it as the video.
I optimize the clip so we would see it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So this is Ernst Hermann, Hari. There is a whole chapter about him. You probably remember, and he was the last person to pass away from the people who are in the book, just 2 years ago on Pesach. 2-3 years ago on Pesach, he passed away, and he was a unique person. He knew why he was doing what he was doing. And for him, the prayer didn't end at the shul, at the synagogue. He was a good man. He was very, very, very special. And this is a film recording. I hope it's going now. Yes. It is coming from clips of a film. And earlier there was a little section when we are discussing. And basically this is outside of the ritual. He's just singing us things.
So we're not hearing any audio.
No, there is nothing.
Okay.
You will hear it in a
Okay.
moment. You will hear it in a moment. These are just stills.
I see.
שיר המעלויס ממעמקים כרוסיכו אדוי שם שמו בקולי תהיינו עזך ושיבויס בכל תכניתנוי עם אבוי נויס תשמו בוריו אדוי שם ויעמוי כי הם חוסליחו למען תבוראי כביסי אדוי שם כבסובו נפשי ולדבוראי יכולתי נפשי לאדוי שם משומרים לבויקר שומרים לבויקר יחל ישראל אל אדוי שם כי מדוי שם החסד והרבה מויפדיס והירדס ישראל מכל אבוי נויסוף.
Thank you for sharing that.
Now I could show that melody with a beautiful voice. No slipping of the pitches. But to me, this is heartbreaking. Absolutely heartbreaking. And you know, people really loved him as a prayer leader.
Uh-huh.
And nobody complained about his voice, as nobody complained about anything, because he has so much intensity in what he's doing that it just carries you.
Yeah. Absolutely. That kind of brings me to this second question that I wanted to make sure we try to squeeze in the second topic before we start wrapping up here and open up to some questions. And there's another little passage that if you wouldn't mind reading, it's on page 141. There's two short little paragraphs here. And it sets up this tension. You're sort of explaining this tension between davening and songs, and you're sort of really explaining how you understand the role of those things interacting with each other in this space. And there's the in the middle of the page there, so you say, yes, I told myself the recitation holds.
Yeah, I know that.
If you don't want to, that's also okay.
No. I will do well.
You write so beautifully there and so succinctly about this very precise distinction you've drawn there, and it really struck me as that it's so intense, the stream, when you're able to join the stream of that never-ending davening, that you need these songs to sort of be a contrast somehow. And I was struck by the way you wrote about that topic.
Yes. So Okay, so maybe the first thing I'm thinking of what to show, and I'm going to make you listen to something in a second. You know, I don't hear these people singing out of tune, or I don't hear them as don't hear this music as not being beautiful, but they definitely use many microtones.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And we may not, I mean, some people who say that this is out of tune, actually they are not wrong, because they hear those microtones and may be bothered by them. And some people that say, oh, no, I don't see anything wrong with it, may not just pay attention to that or correct it in their mind. So everybody hears it a little bit differently. But what is the most the most important, and there are many topics that I'm skipping over. I'm not talking about what the nusach is. I'm not talking about what the prayer leader is supposed to do. I'm not talking about whether this is in accordance, in what way it is in accordance with the nusach, in what way it's not. I mean, each of these pieces raise a lot. I mean, nusach is the way you should sing it in a certain situation, and many people use the nusach just to reflect the generic melodic style, but there are very particular rules and certain things, for instance, that May Sarosh did were not in accordance with those very particular melodic rules that or formal rules that are typical of the Hallel. So there is really a big pool of things that I sort of hush over, and what I'm saying here is very imprecise. But what I really want to say is, and maybe that relates to the songs, the contrast between recitative and songs, that there really is no contrast. The recitative never stops, never really stops. It's in the mind of the people, and the songs are similarly personal. And what was most important in this book for me was perhaps not even that to give an account of what I discovered with these Jewish people, but to give an account of our lives and how we relate to music. And it's very interesting that some of the most important and really the most remarkable reflections I got from Christians. So for me, the most important thing is when you take off everything what I told so far about the religion and about the practice and about everything. This is an example of a human creation that finds a certain way to access something very deep in us, which we can find in many other ways, in millions of other ways, but this is one way. And that I think that is the essence. It's not like whether they are singing, I mean, that's also important, whether they are singing microtones or out of tune or not out of tune, in the nusach, not in the nusach, but that this is a channel to access something that is very, very important. And also something I did not explain, and this last music I want to show will maybe illustrate it. It's a kind of intimacy. That, yes, there is this big noise, which is not always so big. Sometimes this noise is very silent, but the whole thing is at the same time very spontaneous and very intimate.
Yeah.
You feel you somehow. I felt I was at home. It's very stupid to say because I so much wasn't at home. That wasn't my home. My home was the concert hall and the opera house and the theaters. But in some ways, you are so much at home because of this. You see that everybody has this intimacy with himself, and I wish if that we could conquer that capacity in many things in our modern lives. And so for me, maybe that was the most important. I found here something that was I felt was not entirely missing, but was covered in many layers.
Yeah.
That you just sing out your pain. And of course, there are many sections in the book which are talking about that. The most amazing thing was that I know this a little bit boasting, but it's so typical. I give my writings about Jewish music to a friend of mine who's a Satmar Hasid, and he appears in the book, not under his name, under a pseudonym, but he appears in the book. And he's really a Satmar Hasid. And I want him to, just to check, whether I say something really stupid. And he read this book and he came back to me and he said, why I like this book. He found a few mistakes which are corrected, but besides that, why I like this book? Because if I take everything away, all the Jewishness, what interests me, what remains. Mm-hmm. And this is a book that something remains. And so for me to hear that from a Satmar Hasid was really quite remarkable.
Yeah.
Quite remarkable. And and also when I was writing this, I was reading a lot. Well, I was reading a lot, many things, but among that I was reading a lot the Torah. Mm-hmm. And I was reading a lot the Psalms, the Tehillim. And those texts work. They work as a narrative, but that's not the deepest.
Right.
They really work like what actually you did with this book. That you put a magnifying glass and you see this section and that section. And
you describe this finger telescope.
Finger telescope thing, and I think spontaneously I wrote that, which is not a very good thing if you want to get popular, because people like to read books from beginning to end and then that's it. Yeah. And this is not that kind of book, which I didn't plan. But now retrospectively I see, and now I see more why certain people can connect to this. So let's get to this example that you are waiting for. Okay. This is going to be wrote, and that's going to be at your secret request, the melody that I was breaking my head, what it might be. And I don't give any introduction. This is very, 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 very special. It's the middle section of the Kedisha, Mimchaim Humakenu, Sophia, in the Ashkenazi pronunciation.
תשכון תסגדל וססגדל בסך ירושלים ירחו לדור ודור לנצח נצחים.
Okay, I don't want to go into what is the context. So he's singing all of the Kedusha, and it's very interesting that just at Mim Koim Ho, he's choosing to sing that. I wrote an article about this, what's the reason? And it has a very deep personal reason. But what is amazing about this is not really a song, so I didn't quite do what you asked me to do.
That's okay.
But it essentially has 4 notes, mostly 3. It has an additional note at the beginning, but it appears only at the very beginning. And when I was playing this in class, and I told the students, well, you know what, do you like this melody? It has 4 notes. One of them, the most talented one, told me that he's singing these 4 notes that it seems to be like 100 notes. Mm-hmm. So of course you can have a scientific explanation, and it's really the microtones. It's amazing, the very slight microtonal variations, which many people don't hear because we are so used to just hearing these things in minor. So I just showed the very beginning. So it's very hard for me to tell what's so unbelievably moving about this melody. So it's just but the way he's doing it, the way he's and when it goes up to the 5th, this God is. It's almost like a fantastic. This God is. That is and then it drops back. When we get to this 5th, it's almost like singing an octave or the high C in an opera. It's so emotionally charged.
Yeah.
So that kind of magic, what he's doing with his voice, and we analyzed this, and we analyzed several of Roth's performances, and really it's not the same. So with the psalmization, you can say la 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 do la re do la do re do re do la. There's nothing else, but the do is always a little bit different. Absolutely. And the accent is different, and the emotion is different, and to me this is coming from somewhere very, very deep.
Well, you have these infinite, it really shows these infinite spaces between these simple notes, that between each note, between each thing is this expansive space. And I think Sarah wrote in the chat that there's time also.
There is time.
This time.
Yes.
And something that struck me too. There's time, there's longing, there's stretch, that gives you time to really feel.
Yeah. Yes, there is time. There is this motion of the no, mother Parmon bells, like
Yeah,
almost like
like a ship.
when he gets to the end. And I don't know. I
Yeah,
can't explain, but there is a gesture. There is this feeling of going back and forth, and you can't even tell what kind of mode this is because really it's just four notes. It's okay. He's sleeping. Okay, but that's really not an important note. There's four essential notes, and mostly it's three. And there is space, and there is something about the rhythm, and something about his voice. That his voice is so intimate, so deep, and very clear at the same time. Now, that's not his real voice because he was very sick when I recorded this. He was just coming out of the hospital. Actually, he has a very, very beautiful voice, which I don't know if it comes through here.
comes through.
But he has this kind of extremely, it's not like the one we have seen on the film, not like Hari, who really cannot, he doesn't have I mean, I like his voice, but from looking at it from an operatic point of view, he doesn't have a voice.
Right.
Now, Roth was asked to sing in the opera, and he didn't. He decided not to, but he really has a superb voice, which we don't hear, but we hear the control. He's never going out of control. He's always, and yet the gestures are there. So he has a very, very different way. It's very different from Mészáros. Mészáros has a very different way of expression, and Roth has a different way, and Erbs has a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And if I compare, which I did in an article, I compare the same sections, how each of them sings. It's a different.
Totally
you
different.
can see that they are different personalities.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate you bringing that piece to us. But I want to, unfortunately, we're getting to the moment where we have to start thinking about where we stop today. I wanted to make sure to give some time for questions from our audience here, from the people who have joined us today. I have a million more questions, but I think I want to turn it over to let some other people in, and I'm gonna just leave the chat open here. If anybody has a specific question, now would be the time to write it in the chat, and we'll see what we can do here. I was also struck, another passage that really spoke to me is this. There's one on page 159 when you're starting to think about leaving, and you go to one of the shuls that you first went to, and you're talking about it's the on page 159. It's the paragraph above the break.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Would you be willing to read us a little bit of that one?
But what shall I?
Well, just
just explain.
No, just read it. I mean, you've explained it beautifully in the text you wrote. So if you wouldn't mind reading us that text.
You want me from suddenly?
Yes, please.
Okay, at your command.
I think
suddenly. Okay, so that was the first synagogue I went to. That's clear that was, and it comes back every time. And I'm the only woman there. I'm behind curtain, a curtain, half outsider. They don't talk to me. I also don't talk to them. Well, we talk, we ask, how are you doing? But, there really is not much conversation. And that was the the shul where I was hesitant to start singing. But then I started to sing the prayers, and I was much more a soprano in those days, and I was singing in chorus, so it was quite different from the generic male sound. And they never stopped me, and they never said anything. But I describe in a previous chapter that at some point a man came to me and asked for my Jewish name, and he said, "We want to include you in the prayer." So I mean, I still have tears in my eyes when so they say, "Tell you nothing," but actually, so anyway, suddenly it dawns on me that I'm less an outsider than I had thought. For a long time now, I have not made any particular effort to remain invisible. I allow the paper to rustle when I unpack a prayer book and cross the men's section to get to the shelf if I need another one. The men neither stop me nor encourage me. Some seem to look through me, but others smile, speak to me, and pray for me. It is all very natural. During the service, I breathe my high-pitched little melodies, hesitant and bizarre smoke rings into their cloud. I let my voice model their well-rehearsed theater. I have never been told to stop. Their service has become what it is because I am among them. They will miss me. And I'd never seen them again, actually.
Yeah. It's such a poignant, point on your journey there.
Yeah. Yes, most people I had never seen after I immigrated. When I went back, I couldn't go back to Hungary for 9 years, and they just weren't there anymore.
Yeah. So it was you're rather unsparing of yourself in this book.
Yes.
You don't give yourself, you talk about sort of being ashamed of yourself or not knowing, and at various points along the way you're sort of hard on yourself, but I'm really glad that you included this passage.
Yeah. Well, there are other things. I mean, I kind of made sure that Roth very much wanted me to come, and Gertner also. So actually, when I think about these things later, these people couldn't share this with anybody.
Right.
No one cared. And I have to say that after communism collapsed, which is also in my book, also no one cared, because then Chabad came, and then everything, was very different.
Be amazing, right?
And then everything was fresh and new, and according to a new world order.
Right.
So nobody told that to me with that many words, but I remember, I mean, whenever I visited Roth, they baked for me. I mean, it was a holiday, and whenever I visited Goethe, and that was always, they baked for me. so it's there was a way of expressing that. Maybe they also got something from me.
Yeah,
I hope.
I know they did. I'm sure.
I hope.
Sure of it.
I hope.
So Asya Fruman has a question. So if you would be so kind to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about the first piece that you played tonight, in which we can hear multiple voices, and I wanted to ask whether it's due to the fact that I don't know, it was recorded from afar, but in the first piece, it's mostly buzz-like. It's buzzing, while the later pieces, they are melodies that evolve, that waver, And is it because that those were sung by Baltfil as opposed to the general like bulk of people who were davening, or is it because it's just you know, a recording taken from afar as opposed to you know, something you asked people specifically to sing into the dictaphone? Am I making sense?
Yeah, all of this. So you know, when I record them at home, not in a studio. I didn't have a studio, but I went to their homes, or we met somewhere. Of course, there is no community, so there is silence, and of course, I didn't talk about the prayer leader, what the prayer leader does. And that's so something is very much missing from my explanation, because I was really talking about mostly from the individual, for the point of view of the person. But the prayer leader, so let's put it that way. There is a system of systems for the prayer leader's parts. The prayer leader doesn't sing everything. He sings certain sections, and for the sections that he would not sing, he would go under into this murmur. So that kind of murmur would be there mostly all the time. I mean, there are certain times not in the Tfilah and the Shmona Esrei, or you know, certain times it's not. But I don't want to get into details. On the whole, you have something like this murmur, but that murmur can be very, very different. It can be much more melodic. It can be, you could really distinguish voices singing melodiously. Now, how much the individual person sings of the, say, let's call it nusach, but I don't like to call it nusach in the company of cantors, because these people understood something else by nusach. Okay, let's not call it nusach. Let's call it system of systems. So how much this individual person sings in this system of systems, melodically and rhythmically and from every other, that's his choice. Mostly, certainly not everything, so because there is no time for it, and much of it is just very simple recitation. So there are many reasons to what you heard, that it's so different, that you don't hear the melodies. It's like because of how many people there were. You know, if there would have been fewer people, if it would have been Shabbat, if it would have been Yom Kippur and fewer people, the sound would be very different. Now, if you would ask any of them to sing the proper melody according to the system of system, that anybody would sing differently, not so fast. But it's it's a very flexible system, very flexible system. Some people don't even sing, they just speak. And you know what you heard, first of all, there were many people. I was far. I had to be on the second floor. So there was a lot of echo. And it's a weekday service. So there were many reasons for it. Yeah, that's what I can say fast. So, you know, nothing I played here is can be taken as some kind of hardcore rule, that's how it's. The whole tradition is so flexible and so much in movement that you have to ask me a very pointed question. You know, what would be done in the Hallel in this part of Hungary, or in this kind of synagogue at that part of the Hallel and at that part of, and then maybe I can answer, maybe.
Yeah.
maybe. But in this general sense, there are just so many things can happen. And so much depends on the architecture. I wrote an article about that, by the way. A lot depends on the architecture. This space had a lot of echo, and it was relatively big for this community. That was the Ambroise Thomas, the Rue Ambroise Thomas. There was a Polish-Hungarian synagogue there when I recorded this in Paris.
In part of this conversation, we have another question from Eleanor Brzezinski, who I see there, and also Gabriel Zuckerman has a question, and I'm going to let him ask in a minute. But you write at one point, you have a description, I think, in the Yenu Rot chapter, where you're saying that sometimes the cantor would not even sing the Nusach at all, but everybody would have it in their minds, and that allowed the cantor to depart entirely because it was so familiar and so well carried that everybody knew what it was, giving them the freedom of whoever was leading the prayer or doing a more really depart entirely from it, because it was always underneath in everybody's minds. I thought that was very fascinating.
Yeah, but okay, that book just gives this kind of general sense that there is difference between a Baal Tfilah, a prayer leader, and or Shliach Tzibur, simple Shliach Tzibur, and a Chazan. Now he's talking about the improvising Chazan, and that was a profession.
I see.
That was something else. It's not like anybody could just go up and start singing no matter what. Sure. You really had to learn that, and you usually learned it from masters, and that was a professional art. And also, it was not customary to do it at any part. So Hazan cannot go out and say, do a cantorial improvisation of Psuka de Zimra, or I don't know what. He wouldn't even be there. Maybe he didn't even arrive by then, So I mean, the section I showed from the Kedusha, for instance, the Kedusha was almost free. There was, I might say, it was allowed to continue the Nusach Shabbat, the typical melody of Shabbat, and there are some people who are doing that, but the cantor had great freedom. Some other parts, no. Yeah. Some other parts, he didn't have that freedom. So you really had to know who can do it, when. It had to be an occasion. Certainly not a weekday, not a weekday, and not every part. And there had to be a total sense of proportion. So even though there could have been Hazanic improvisation here and here and here and here and here, in a normal service, a Hazan wouldn't choose to do all of them.
All of them, right.
So it's a flexible system.
Right, and balanced, but flexible and balanced.
It's a symphony composed on the spot.
On the spot, absolutely.
Yeah, and sometimes a Hazan feels that they told me about ballet Tfilah, that there were too many of these. No, I just rushed through this, and so they react to the audience.
Yeah, I'd like to. Eleanor's been waiting patiently, so I'd like to get her question in. And thanks, Eleanor, and thanks, Asha, for your question.
Well, first I want to thank you both because it's really amazing to hear this, and so both moving and interesting, and such a different way of talking about the music. So yeah, thank you. And speaking about this symphony, I have memories growing up in Paris. I was going with my grandparents to a shul called Mishkenat Israel, and mostly for the high holidays, but they would hire a chazan, but also, and so there was this atmosphere that you describe, and that we could hear. I could recognize that, but there was something else that would that always struck me in the sound, and that sort of amused me too. But I'm very curious what exactly it was, if there is any explanation possible. That there were these younger the boys, and also as a kid I had access to the men's section, so I would go with my grandfather pretty near the Bima actually for several years. But anyway, but so there was these younger boys who would sometimes have their voice like they would raise their voice louder and maybe higher too. I'm not sure about that, but the younger boys had their voice come across in this. There was this general mingling, and then you could hear like these voices sort of come across louder a little bit. So for me it sounded like they wanted to show off a little bit, but I wonder, or there was something of maybe it's a local thing in this synagogue. It's a local culture that's there. I don't know if it's something you've encountered, and if you have any ideas about this.
No, I don't know. I don't have any such experiences, but of course every synagogue is different, and especially the high holidays. So the high holidays are so special. There are, in my view, the rules are completely different.
Okay.
It's so really, it's nothing I can say about this.
Yeah, I missed out on the more on the weekdays, that's for sure.
Yeah. Thanks, Eleanor. Gabriel, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question? I see you wrote it in the chat, but I think it's nice to have you ask it in person.
Sure, thank you. And thank you so much for the great talk. I mean, this question kind of goes in a different direction, but something that I think, or at least as far as I could tell, is phenomenologically important to davening. So maybe you'll find it completely irrelevant, but something that struck me consistently, rather in melody, I guess, is the layer of vocal timbre, vocal quality, and just that all of the informants seem to share, at least to some degree, a really like dark, breathy sort of chest voice. And maybe this is just a culturally specific thing, but I mean, it probably is. But like, especially with regard to, or like in comparison to various Sephardi traditions and Romaniote chanting and whatnot, where maybe a sort of the sound of a static prayer, the timbre of the voice is quite different. So I'm just wondering if that sort of very dark, breathy timbre has something to do with like consciously important to the informants who you worked with, or the overall soundscape and experience of praying with many people and the sort of blending together of it, or something else, or maybe if it's just a mystery. But yeah,
I really feel that culture allows for many different voice qualities. I don't know. I cannot say that there is maybe an ideal voice for a Hazan, or several. That's not one, but maybe he has to have a good voice. Okay, so there is an idea that yes, about Tefillah and the Hazan. It's also a prayer leader. About Tefillah is a prayer leader, and the cantor has to have a good voice. But I think that the voice quality is one of the most important thing in this whole business, and the voice quality makes it possible for certain people to sing what they sing. And if you would sing that with another voice quality, then it would not work. And I have this in an article. I write about this. there is an enormous tolerance for voice quality. They let people with impossible voice qualities really coarse and they let them pray. So I don't know whether that answers your question. Again, they have to feel that it's real. They have to feel that whoever is standing there in front of them and praying is doing it for real. At least the communities I worked with. That it's not just a theater, and they really have to feel this. And I really have seen in the particular community that you see in the film, they actually sent away a very nice, very sweet young cantor who had a not wonderful, but he had a very good voice. He really had a very good voice, and he knew the melodies, and they said they wanted Hari, the person you have seen. Until at some point, the pressure was so great from certain part of the community that they opted for the cantor with the good voice. Yeah. And basically, to me, that was the end of that community as I knew it. But in the old tradition, it's really, really, really amazing. And it's really not that it doesn't matter, so it's not important. They value a good voice and they value good musicality. But the passion overrides everything, and that's very clear. And they make this very, very, very clear in the traditional communities. And the result is that I had known somebody who was practically whispering. He was singing, whispering, and that community loved him. I recorded him. Of course, with the recording, it's easy because you can put the microphone very close, but I don't know. Does that answer your question, or you wanted to hear something else?
I wanted to hear exactly however you would respond to it, so thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. Anybody else have a question before we start wrapping up? Agnes? Go ahead and unmute yourself.
I want to thank you. It's fascinating, and I come to it from a position of total ignorance. And nevertheless, if I dare, I'd like to ask the question, is the tradition entirely oral, handed down from one to the other within a community, or is there a notation? And if there is notation, how far does it go back?
Okay, very good question. Wow, not so simple. It appears to us, or to me at least, that melodically, yes, let's say melodically, the basic the melodic foundation of the repertoire for the services was more or less known all over the Ashkenazi world, including Germany. The way this repertoire is practiced and performed was, it seems to us, it seems to me, and I have to say it seems to, because there were not extensive recordings, in the 19th century and not even in the 20th century. It seems to me that the actual way they were singing and practicing these melodies and the attitude toward these melodies and what they saw in these melodies was very different in the East and in the West. Now, there were very few notations coming from East Europe, East and Middle Central Europe. And even those notations, there were notations of cantors, of cantorial pieces, but that's not the basic melodies that really existed. Probably there were notations, but by and large, the tradition was oral. So I certainly didn't meet anybody who learned that from notes. That was unheard of. Now in the German territories, mostly that was the same. So as much as I know that territory much less, but as much as I know, the prayer leaders did not learn from notations, but from the late 18th century, cantors had been notating their melodies, and they called them handbook, usually a handbook of the cantor. This really goes back to the late 18th century, and then we have a lot from the 19th century, and then second half of the 19th century, really many printed and handwritten manuscripts. And these, and you can see that the melodic basis is the same. So it's the same general melodic ideas that you find in the East. But in the East, we don't even know whether the West they use these books. It's not clear, whether anybody actually learned from these books. I don't know. I didn't research that question. The cantorial variations, yes, that people learned and memorized, and that was something else altogether. But the simple nusach, not that I know of. But certainly the tradition I'm dealing with is completely oral. It was completely oral. Sorry, this is a complicated historical question.
That is complicated. If I may just follow it up, if there would be notation at all, then would that be regarding pitch or rhythm or both?
No, just pitch.
Just pitch.
Because the rhythm is free rhythm. It's a recitative rhythm. So mostly, well, maybe there would be rhythm because they felt they have to fit it into 4/4. That happens. But and if there would be a metric piece, yes, absolutely. But most of the melodies are in a kind of flowing rhythm, and so how they notated them, how much they metricized them or not, it's a question of the Hazan all the time.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you did. I wonder about one little mini question. You write, and several of your informants tell you that this prayer melodies were so embedded that they didn't study them even in Cheder. They had to already know them from, as you say, before they could even speak. Really, they were learning these melodies, and I think that I heard that even your focus on this particular aspect of Jewish culture was not received like that. I don't know if you got pushback, but you mentioned that people were wondering why are you doing this?
Oh, yes.
What is this about? Why bother? This is so essential,
Okay, well, these are two questions. First of all, the children already knew the prayers and they were praying with melody. Whether they were praying every time with the the Baal Tfilah, the prayer leader has a special melody. I'm really not sure that these kids at the age of 2 or 3 were singing those melodies. There is no, I didn't find anything about that, but they were there at the synagogue every Shabbat. So, these were talented kids who already knew the text, who were already reciting this melody. So I suppose, and there are many accounts that by age of 6, I knew all the melodies of the Baal Tfilah. And yes, so probably they just learned it. They just picked it up. but that certainly didn't pick up the melodies before they could read. I mean, they could read the prayers and they could pray, and certainly not before they could speak. So I think what must have happened before they could speak was more like a child talk of the prayers. I suppose, I don't know. And so that's one thing. Actually, I think anybody who goes every Shabbat can pick up the melodies. I mean, it's the Shabbat melodies and the high holidays. That's a different story. That is a different story. But mostly everybody knew these melodies because simply they were there and they heard it so many times, and so they just learned them. Now the other question. Well, I think to me that material is the most fascinating in even philosophically. And I said very, very little. I talked a little bit about the time, a little bit about the space. I didn't talk about the atmosphere. It's really philosophy lived in music. And when you go to a higher level, then I might say you have real music. You have just musical pieces. Really, about Phila sings a melody. That melody is not quite a melody the way we think about melody, because that melody is saturated with the idea that it should be daven and it should be very simple. It should be, anything that comes out. There's a famous Hasidic saying that if it's a mystical Hasidism, that when I really pray, said a tzaddik, I don't care what words come out, which is really something very strong, because words are, if he would say, I don't care what melody comes out, that would be not very interesting, but he didn't even care about the words. So this is something very, very deep. Yeah. And now people are less interested in that. People want that was my impression. I'm sorry. You are also people and you are interested in this, so I cannot say that. But during my career, I mean, I never got any support for this kind of research. I mean, really, I can't say nothing. I applied to buy tape recorders once, and I was granted, so I could buy tape recorders, so these kind of things. But for a research group, I got really very, very, very small things for the recordings. I got no support. Right. Again, support. I got the tape recorders sometimes, which of course in that time that was a big deal. Yeah. That was a big deal to have a good tape recorder, and that was really amazing. And sometimes maybe the travel was paid if I had to go to another place, but. And I never got a job on the basis of that. Right. No, and it's and I was told that very clearly. If you present yourself like somebody who studies these old people's bubbling, then very cleverly, a good friend of mine in the United States, I wanted to write my doctoral dissertation on that topic, and he told, don't be crazy, just don't do it. Wow. And fortunately, I have another field. I have Bartok, so and I certainly wasn't suffering writing about Bartok, so I was very happy. But it was told me very clearly, and yeah, there is no. Let's say it's not in the consciousness of how important this is and how creative and how provocative for us about how we should think about music at all. to me, it really just changed. Well, I have to say, it changed everything. And in a sense, I can even more appreciate the silence in the concert hall, because that's not passive at all.
Right.
Yeah, that's not passive. That's very, very active. And so I had a framework to put that silence and that inner activity. It's just, I just can't tell this. I only can say that humanity would just gain if this practice would be better known.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, then I think it's, I think I can speak for all of us who are here still to say thank you that you did this.
Thank you.
I'm gonna,
Well,
sorry, now it's my turn to cry. This book is so amazing. I love it so much. So I'm gonna just let everybody, let's say thanks to Judit. And go ahead and unmute
Thank you.
yourself if you want to say hi and thank you and all that stuff. Sorry, I'm getting a little worked up. If you have not
Thank
yet
you.
read
Thank you.
this beautiful book, go get it.
I'm immensely grateful. Thank you, Judith. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you.
Judith, thanks to all of you.
Thank you very
Schönen
much.
Dank. Schönen Dank.
My most ever. Thank you, Judith. I remember our talk in Budapest some years ago, and I have a very, very special way to connecting to this book because it also touches on some parts of my own story, of how I came to the world of Nusach and cantorial music, and this. I met you before reading the book, and we had this amazing conversation. And afterwards, reading the book was unforgettable, and still one of my dearest books here on the shelf. Thank you so much.
Thank you for all of you for listening.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Judith.
Thank you very much.
And we'll send you off to our Sunday afternoons and our Sunday evenings. And thank you all so much for being here. And we'll see you again next.